Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about the very best, or let's face it, some of the very best recordings of Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet, one of the most iconic of 19th century tone poems, an indisputable work of genius, and one that, for curious reasons, it's kind of hard to wrap your arms around. It's been recorded 1 billion times. It's received dozens and dozens of really bad recordings because everybody was doing it and some people had no business doing it. And most recently, it's actually been done most miserably, I think, because Tchaikovsky is just not in the blood of so many of today's conductors, who are these sort of cool neo-romantic, neoclassicist, neo-something. But whatever their neos are doing, they are not into the expression of hysterical emotion. They just play it cool and play it neat, play it clean and tidy. And Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet is not clean and tidy. It's a big, hairy, volcanic, sweaty piece of orchestral mayhem. It really is. I mean, Tchaikovsky composed it mostly in like the 1860s or so, and revised it and tinkered and up until about 1880. But the bottom line is that at the time that this piece was written, and we tend to forget this, there had been no piece of music even remotely as hysterical as this. I mean, think about it for a minute. You know, the piece has 3 basic thematic components, right? There's Friar Lawrence at the beginning, whose tune is da 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 da, you know, that thing, right? And then there's the battle music, bum ba da dum bum bum ba ba dum ba 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 dum ba 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 bum chung, you know, like that. And then there's the love theme. Do, 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 do. Okay, I'm not going to sing any more of it, but that's it. That's the thematic element. And eventually, through the stages of revision, Tchaikovsky managed to bash these elements into an absolutely perfect, and I mean perfect, dramatic, fabulously balanced sonata form movement, lasting about 20 minutes. And it's really an extraordinary piece of musical construction, as well as an amazing piece of spontaneous emotional expression. And the form and the content are perfectly mated to each other. It really, really works fabulously well. But, you know, that doesn't mean that everyone's going to play it well. There was a time in the, I think, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you know, 70s sometime, when people just did Tchaikovsky. Almost everyone was doing Tchaikovsky, and almost everyone was doing Tchaikovsky really well. And Romeo and Juliet was one of those pieces that people could haul out, and they would just do it fabulously, because the music is so exciting and so wonderfully, wonderfully scored and written and arranged. And boy, it's all gone to hell in the past few decades. I don't know why. I don't really know why. I just think that the aesthetic seems to be out of fashion with most of today's conductors. And so we do not get great recordings of Romeo and Juliet. And further complicating the matter for today's record collector is the fact that because the piece is only about 20 minutes long, it's a coupling. It's a filler. It always comes with other things. And so finding the really good ones, you can't get it in isolation. You have to get other stuff. And especially now where everything's getting boxed up, you know, you're going to wind up, if you buy physical product, you're going to wind up getting piles of other things that you may or may not want. With that said, it's a perfect piece for digital downloads where you could just get Romeo and Juliet and nothing else. And so that may be, oh my goodness. So that may be the best way to do your Romeo and Juliet business. It may be. I'm not 100% sure, because you may like other things that come with it. But generally speaking, I'm just going to talk about the best recordings of Romeo and Juliet. Now, there's a trick to conducting Romeo and Juliet. The trick to conducting Romeo and Juliet is not, as you might expect, really whipping up the battle music. The battle music is wonderfully exciting. And yes, it's better to play it fast and rhythmic and exciting as hell than to make it less fast and rhythmic and exciting as hell. That is beyond dispute. But you can get away with it. You can get away with it because of the contrast, the scheme of contrast with the love music. And there's always time, if you start the battle somewhat tepidly, to heat it up as the piece goes on. No. The key to a great Romeo and Juliet is the introduction. The introduction with Friar Tuck or Friar Lawrence or whatever his name is, because his music is boring. I mean, it's not boring. It's very pretty. It's do 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 do. You know that thing. The point is that this is big, long introduction with several false starts, all of which is very dramatic. It creates a wonderful feeling of suspense. And when the actual battle erupts, it's kind of surprising because it's not where you would necessarily expect it to happen. It interrupts the introduction. It's a wonderful piece of work and thought on Tchaikovsky's part, but you cannot play it too slowly. And I am not, we always get into this conversation with some of these works, a timing fanatic. Timing is relative in music. And, this piece lasts anywhere from, say, 18 to 22 minutes, depending. But generally speaking, the performances that are about 20 minutes or slightly under are, in my view, the best ones. Not because of the battle music, not because of the allegros, but because the difference in timing is usually in the introduction and the coda to a certain extent too, which is also, slow and droopy. But that introduction needs to move in order to create the necessary suspense and that tension that's generated by those fake climaxes before the actual battle erupts. You need to keep it moving. And so the first 5 minutes or so of the piece, really, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 7 minutes. That's the problem. There are huge differences in how different conductors take that introduction. And if the introduction happens too slowly, then the piece is dead before it ever gets off the ground. And it really doesn't make any difference what happens afterwards, because you will long have fallen asleep. That's the issue. Everything after that more or less takes care of itself. I mean, once it gets going, you just have to play the daylights out of it, and you're in business. It's going to be fabulous. That, and there should be like a timpani crack, like a crack of doom at the end when the lovers' love music gets swallowed up by the battle music. And I do not like spurious percussion added to this piece, such as, a tam-tam crash when the timpani comes in at the very end. Some have done that. It's not necessary. Tchaikovsky was such a great master of the orchestra and so specific in the effect that he wanted. He was really almost unique in his time. And, like I said, when this piece came out in the 1860s, there had never been anything so violent and hysterical ever written. I mean, think about the passage at the end of the development section, just before the battle music comes in the recapitulation, where you have the two trumpets blasting out fortissimo Friar Lawrence's theme, da 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 da, and under that, the entire orchestra, all of it. I mean, the entire orchestra with timpani and bass drum and all that is just going, shut it up, button up, button up, button up, button up, button up, pow, slam, bang, crash. I mean, the entire orchestra is just playing the battle rhythm underneath the trumpet. I mean, that is complete orchestral mayhem. And no one had done that before. Where did Tchaikovsky get it? It comes from Italian music. It comes from the simple sort of bel canto orchestration approach of Bellini and Donizetti, and to a certain extent Verdi, where you have just the orchestra as a giant rhythm section like Il Trovatore. But it had never been done at that level of sheer brutality and violence. And that's the reason that Romeo and Juliet was kind of a failure when it was first performed. People just heard it, they thought, oh my God, it's so loud, it's so noisy, it's so vulgar, it's such screaming, nerve-shattering brutality. And yes, that's why it's so great. That's why we love it now. That was the inspiration for musical primitivism, like the Rite of Spring and things that came later. It's all here in Romeo and Juliet, believe it or not. You just have to look at the right bits. But those bits were considered shocking when they were first performed. And I think that it's good to have performances that can recover for us some of that shocking quality as well. But that's, again, orchestras have no problem doing that. Conductors have a problem playing the introduction at the necessary pace. And so now we've gotten that out of the way. These are the issues that I think people need to consider when evaluating performances of Romeo and Juliet. Those are the things that I consider. Let's look at my top 10 in no particular order. And you'll see some of these are not the most thrilling when it comes to battle music, but they all keep the introduction flowing. And that, to me, is the essence of the piece. So let's start at the beginning. Haitink, Concertgebouw. This is such a great Tchaikovsky cycle. It's chronically underrated because Haitink is usually underrated, especially when it comes to pieces that are full of supposedly spontaneous passion. But Haitink could do it, and he could do it just through beautiful playing and extraordinary musicality and letting the Concertgebouw really collaborate in the interpretation and just play their hearts out, and they do. This is a gorgeous Romeo and Juliet for that reason. And it's exactly the right timing, about 20 minutes, a little bit less. That's what I'm looking for. It's absolutely beautiful. It's now on Decca, and it's worth hearing. If you have his Tchaikovsky cycle, then you have a very beautiful Romeo and Juliet. Here's one that really gets lost to the shuffle and forgotten, but really does not deserve to be. Giulini and the Philharmonia. Giulini's Tchaikovsky cycle, he didn't do everything, but Giulini's Tchaikovsky performances that he made with the Philharmonia for EMI early on in his career, they're marvelous for the most part. Really, really first class. The Francesca da Rimini is great too. But this Romeo and Juliet is not too slow, as he later became, and really absolutely poetic and fabulously well played and well recorded, and it's definitely worth hearing. It's really sort of a sleeper there because people don't usually associate Giulini and Tchaikovsky. But those early Tchaikovsky recordings that he did were really special. Very, very musical, but also never lacking in fire and excitement, like the Verdi Requiem he did around the same time. Full of passion and spontaneity. Really, really good. Just the opposite of the way he started playing later on in his life. Also worth considering, Yuri Timirkanov with the Royal Phil. It's good to get some, old Russian people playing the music of the old Russian style. And yes, it probably would have been even better if he'd had the Leningrad Phil at the time, which he made, some of his Shostakovich recordings with for RCA. But, it's still really good, echt, normal, authentic, Russian-style Tchaikovsky. Spontaneous and impulsive and played with a lot of conviction. And it's really, I enjoyed these performances. And again, people tend not to talk about them very much. Also worth considering, Antal Dorati on Mercury Living Presence. These are fast. This is the London Symphony. These are really fast and hot. This is his early Tchaikovsky period too, with that wonderful Mercury Living Presence sound that's sort of up close and in your face. And it's just exciting. And I like exciting. Tchaikovsky should be exciting. And it has a first move, an introduction that never dawdles. Friar Lawrence is getting through matins and lauds on his way to Vespers, lickety-split, just in time to tell the Montagues and the Capulets to cut the crap. Not that it works, but still, it's nice. It's really good to hear. Also superb and very underrated and neglected, Zubin Mehta. Good old Zubin with the LA Phil. I think this one was with the LA Phil. I just want to make sure it's with LA and not with the Israel Phil. Yeah, it's with LA because Israel is the other stuff. Yes, and it's really, really good. We talked about it when we discussed the Zubin Mehta box. He did so much of this romantic repertoire extraordinarily well. It was in his blood, in his bones, and it has all of that epic spontaneity that the music needs, and excitement and razzle-dazzle and lovely playing and nice rich, full recording. It's gorgeous. Nothing not to love. Zubin Mehta's Romeo and Juliet. You've got to consider it. Also, now here is the Russian version par excellence, and some of you probably knew this is coming. The last Svetlanov recording. These were the ones done in the 90s in digital, and not his earlier ones. This stuff is just unreal. It's absolutely unreal. It is pedal to the metal from the very beginning. Total screaming hysteria, cataclysm, apocalyptic fury, insanity. These are great. This is all the tone poems. These were originally coupled. They were on Canyon Classics and all that. But this is the last digital recordings I think that he did. And it also comes with, this 2-disc set comes with the Capriccio Italien and the March Slav in 1812 and the Serenade and a Francesca da Rimini, which will have you sweating. I mean, it's like, oh, God, unbelievable. And so is the Romeo and Juliet. You used to be able to get the Romeo and the Francesca together on one disc, alone on like Canyon Classics or one of those Japanese things. But here they are on Melodia and Warner and Melodia and whatever it is these days. If you can find it, more power to you, because it is a smoker. It is hot, 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 hot. Also superb. Always a classic. Bernstein, New York Phil. Bernstein was a great Tchaikovsky conductor, nowhere more so than in the music that required impulsive, spontaneous, hysterical passion whipped up to a nice frothy lather. And that is what he does. This has lots of froth, and I love froth. Just like I liked fluff when we talked about Massenet, froth and fluff and froth, that's this stuff. Yeah, wonderful. Absolutely thrilling performance, full of passion and heat. It's hot, hot, hot. You want heat. So there's heat. Another sort of, which one is this? Oh, yeah. Can't forget this. Boy, this one almost set a new standard in Romeo and Juliet's for passion allied with precision. Riccardo Muti with the Philharmonia. He redid it with Philadelphia. That one's very good, but not as good as his earlier one and not as well recorded. And I have to say, when I talked about that crazy passage at the end of the development being sort of related to Tchaikovsky's experience of Italian music, you can really hear it here in these Muti recordings, because you have the same sort of sensibility at work that undermines those really exciting Verdi recordings he made at the same time, like his Macbeth, for example, and his Verdi Requiem. All that pounding and heaving and rhythmic intensity and vibrancy and precision. And, boy, was that exciting. Muti was such an exciting conductor in his Philharmonia period, one of the great Tchaikovsky cycles. And this is a fantastic Romeo and Juliet. Absolutely fantastic. I mean, it really is one of the great ones. Also one of the great ones, and one that you may not have thought about particularly. Let me see here. Let me make sure it's in here. Yeah, I know it's in here, but I was making sure where it is. Rostropovich. His Tchaikovsky cycle never got a lot of attention. It was with the London Phil. Yeah, because it was kind of slowish and heavy, and he wasn't a great conductor. Really ever, but this was sort of the start of his conducting career. But he did a single disc originally on EMI of Romeo and Juliet and Francesca da Rimini that were fantastic. Absolutely one of the great pairings of those works. Again, it seems to have been lost in the shuffle of, Tchaikovsky couplings and recouplings and decouplings and uncouplings and discouplings and, the way everything just comes and goes and vanishes and reappears. But these were great performances. And his Romeo and Juliet, it has a slowish introduction, but still it is an extraordinary performance, full of just the right kind of spontaneous passion and excitement that you really want with this piece. And it was something really to be proud of. And it really, I think, sort of established him as a conductor of note, at least in this Russian music. So, Rostropovich. Of course, it's attached to all this other Tchaikovsky. So if you can get it as a digital download and listen to it separately, do that. You really should give that a shot. However, we always need to pick just one that really just, I think, incorporates everything you want in a wonderful, wonderful Romeo and Juliet. And my choice is Munch with the Boston Symphony. Oh, this is so great. It's great in so many ways. First of all, it's 19 minutes and 3 seconds long, just under 20 minutes, which is exactly what I'm usually looking for. That's fantastic. But beyond that, the orchestra, it was the perfect orchestra for this stuff. First of all, it comes with an absolutely amazing Potatique symphony too. Munch's Potatique is just a knockout of a Potatique. But the orchestra itself, trained under Koussevitzky in that French-Russian combination of aesthetics. That was what this orchestra did at the time in the 50s and 60s and 70s better than anybody. Really, really better than anybody. It has the Russian passion and intensity with the French elegance. You can hear it even in the percussion playing. One of the things about the Boston percussion is when they had rapid eighth notes, like in the sword fight music in the battle, the cymbals are going, that abrupt, sec quality, that sharpness of focus, it changes the whole character of the music when you have playing of that kind of precision and accuracy. And Munch is just going nuts and letting it all go, but the orchestra is supplying the precision, the rhythmic accuracy that allows Munch to completely go nuts on the podium, and you get the best of both worlds. You really do. This is such a great Romeo and Juliet, and if you don't know it, I really suggest you give it a listen. It will thrill you. I guarantee it will thrill you. And as far as you'll notice, so many of these are older recordings of Romeo and Juliet. Not more recent ones. And that's because I found so many of the more recent ones to be so unsatisfying. I'm not saying that some newer ones don't exist. We go into the 90s after all. Some of these recordings done in the 90s, there are some digital ones. So, there was Ivan Fischer on Channel Classics is very, very good. Daniela Gatti did a very good one. There are some others because there are many others that are very good. But I'm getting older, and as I listen to the classics that I grew up with and compare them with the newer things that are coming out, I really do find that something tends to be missing in most modern recordings. And I feel really bad about saying that because my contention has always been that there are always great recordings coming, that older recordings aren't necessarily better. I am not sunk in nostalgia. I don't believe that all great performances are history and gone and that there is no great music making going on. I've made many videos where I talk about the most recent versions of things is the best I've ever heard. So there's always the possibility that greatness will come along. I'm not ruling it out, but Tchaikovsky seems to be a special case. And I think Romeo and Juliet is a wonderful test piece for the question of whether the modern conductorial aesthetic is the best for realizing Tchaikovsky's intentions. I don't think it is, at least as regards most conductors out there today. So start off with Munch. Give it a shot and see if you don't agree with me. I'd be curious to have your opinion as well. So thank you for joining me in talking about this marvelous, marvelous tone poem. One that is so iconic and so well known that we tend to forget about it entirely and ignore it and don't treat it like the incredible masterpiece it really is. Don't take it for granted. Keep on listening. Thank you, friends. Take care.